So first and foremost, my name is Russell Brooks, and I'm really glad to talk with you today. I'm the Public Affairs Officer here at the U.S. Consulate General in Lagos. I'm a career Foreign Service Officer. I joined the Foreign Service in 2004. In Nigeria, I've been here almost 4 years now. I initially worked in Abuja as the Information Officer, and now I'm down here in Lagos as the Public Affairs Officer. As a career Foreign Service Officer, I worked in a variety of places. My first assignment was in Honduras in Central America. I worked in Peru, that's in South America. I went to Iraq. Well, you know where Iraq is. And I've also served in Washington for a few tours. And then while I was in Washington, I worked for the Bureau of African Affairs, and that's what introduced me to African issues. Now, like most people who joined the Foreign Service, I knew something about Africa before I joined the State Department. But obviously, my experience became a lot more intense once I was working in Washington. That interested me in all of the variety of issues, concerns, problems, etc., that exist on the continent, and I was very anxious to serve on the continent. My first assignment in Africa was in Cote d'Ivoire, one of your neighboring countries, and then I came from there directly to Nigeria. So that gives you a little bit of background about me professionally. Academically, I attended the University of Pennsylvania, and I received my bachelor's in political science there. I then went to Seton Hall University, and I went to their School of Diplomacy. I received a master's in both international relations and international business. During that time, I was also actually working in New York City. I worked for ABC Sports for many years. In total, I spent 20 years in television broadcasting, initially in public television and then at ABC Sports. And then I developed the desire to get into public service, and that's when and why I joined the Foreign Service. Okay, married, have 2 children. To some degree, they're following in my footsteps. My daughter is at Georgetown University in Washington, where she is studying Middle Eastern affairs, and she will join the Foreign Service when she gets finished. And my son is working in the development world. He's right now a contractor with United States Agency for International Development. So maybe international relations is in the blood now. As I said, the family is sort of following in my footsteps. Okay, so I think that is enough about me. We're going to move on to a short presentation that's going to answer some of your questions about public diplomacy. And then what the presentation does not answer, we'll take some of your questions via our chat box. Okay? Okay, so the title of my presentation is Understanding American Public Diplomacy, and the subtitle, What Are We Trying to Achieve in Nigeria? Well, as I said, I am a career Foreign Service Officer working with the U.S. Department of State. That is what we call the equivalent of your foreign ministry. Even some Americans sometimes get a little confused about what we mean by the Department of State. You know, we're not, they think we sort of are an agency with a state government as an example. But no, the Department of State is the lead agency for foreign policy in the United States government. We are not the only department or agency that has an interest in international issues. As you might imagine, the Pentagon or Department of Defense also has an interest in international affairs. The Department of Commerce does, the Department of Treasury does, the Department of Justice does. But the historical lead agency for foreign policy in the United States government is the Department of State. The department is led by the Secretary, who is currently Mike Pompeo, and we're a very large agency. Not the largest agency in the United States government. Actually, our department is much larger than the State Department. But as compared to other foreign ministries, we're quite large. You can see we have 15,000 employees, and we have over 160 posts around the world. And so if you compare that to some of our peers, whether we're talking about the UK, France, Germany, China, etc., we're pretty large. Though in this day and age, China is rapidly catching up, and they, at this point, I think have as many posts as we do. What is the mission of the State Department? Well, as I mentioned, we lead America's foreign policy through diplomacy, advocacy, and assistance by advancing the interests of the American people, their safety, and economic prosperity. So, what's the purpose of foreign policy? Well, people have a variety of outlooks on why we do what we do. But I think the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, captures it very, very well. She says the purpose of foreign policy is to persuade others to do what we want, or better yet, to want what we want. In other words, it will be a lot more effective for us if other countries are on the same page as us, that they want the same things as us. In today's world, cooperation is paramount. And so though people tend to believe that as a superpower, you can sort of make people do things, in reality, what we want to do is persuade people to do the things that we are in agreement on. So if we're trying to persuade people to do things that are in our mutual interest, then public diplomacy is very important. Now, public diplomacy to a certain degree is a relatively new concept, and in Nigeria as well as other countries, our public diplomacy efforts are led by the public affairs sections, whether that is in an embassy or whether that's a consulate, and the head of the public affairs section is the public affairs officer. So in Nigeria, I head the public affairs section in Lagos. We have a country public affairs officer who heads up the section at the embassy in Abuja. We all work for the ambassador, who heads up the operations for the U.S. mission here in Nigeria. U.S. mission, I think some people are curious as to what do we mean by that. Well, if we have an embassy, which is located in Abuja, and we have a consulate, which is located here in Lagos, the two of them comprise the U.S. mission in Nigeria. The U.S. mission is led by the ambassador, and there is a deputy chief of mission, currently Kathleen Fitzgibbons, and they represent the leadership for the entire mission. In Lagos, the consulate general is led by a principal officer. That is Claire Pierangelo. She's a career foreign service officer as well. The team here in Lagos is composed of both Americans and Nigerians. And in the consulate, and actually we also have a variety of agencies at the embassy. We have more than just the State Department. So as I mentioned, some of those agencies that have an interest in international affairs, commerce, agriculture, justice, drug enforcement agency, etc., they have representatives at the embassy. Some of them have representatives here at the consulate, and they form up the entire U.S. team. Now, what are our goals here in Nigeria? I said that the purpose of public diplomacy is to communicate and advance our mission goals. So you are certainly curious as to what those goals happen to be. Well, we want to improve the economic stability, security, and well-being of Nigerians. Okay? We want to do that by strengthening democratic institutions, improving governance, transparency, and accountability, promoting human rights, encouraging two-way trade and investment, and we also are focused on professionalizing the security forces here. So those represent our overall goals here. Now, our U.S. assistance also incorporates or encompasses a few different things in addition to those that I mentioned. We want to improve the health and education services here as much as we can. We support improvements in agricultural productivity, and we also contribute to assisting Nigeria in the delivery of reliable and affordable energy. Now, if those are our goals, how does public diplomacy advance those goals? Well, we run or manage a variety of different programs. We engage in capacity building with the media. We also engage with the media on a regular basis to ensure that they understand what we are doing. So as an example, this week, the ambassador has provided an opportunity for print and online journalists to speak with her. She appeared on Channels Television yesterday. She will be on AIT and TBC today. So we are communicating what we are doing here. Right now, the predominant issue is obviously the response to the pandemic. So the ambassador certainly wants Nigerians to understand what we are doing to assist Nigeria face this pandemic. We organize cultural programs to promote mutual understanding. We have a very robust variety of exchange programs here in Nigeria, whether we're talking about the International Visitors Leadership Program, the Mandela Washington Fellowship, the Fulbright Program, I can go on and on. But every year, we send a large number of Nigerians to the United States to participate in these programs. They return to Nigeria and share what they've learned in their experiences with their fellow Nigerians. You should know that we have an Education USA office here in Lagos, as well as Abuja. And every year, as one would expect from the largest or most populous country on the continent, Nigeria sends more students to the United States than any other country in sub-Saharan Africa. Again, that's only logical. And they go to a wide variety of schools. And so what the Education USA offices do is make Nigerians aware of the educational opportunities that exist in the United States. They also are very interested in financial assistance. And so the Education USA advisors explain to them what schools exist in the United States, what type of opportunities are provided by those schools, the academic programs, for example, and how these students might be able to obtain financial assistance. And then finally, we have American Spaces located throughout Nigeria. So we have one here in Lagos called the American Center that's located right here at the consulate. We have another American Space co-located with the CC Hub here in Lagos. We have a American Space co-located with the Barack Obama Center here in Lagos. And then there are American Spaces in Ibadan. There's one in Port Harcourt. I'm not even mentioning the ones in the north of the country, but I think you get the idea. We have a variety of these spaces throughout the country, and their objective is to share American programs, American history, American culture, American values with Nigerians. We believe if you know us better, you'll have a better understanding of not only what we are trying to accomplish, but why we're attempting to do it. So I sort of covered some of this already, but I did mention that we are located both in Abuja and Lagos. I said that we're doing programs in entrepreneurship. We're doing programs to promote STEM education. We have programs, or a variety of programs, to help the disabled, health education, such as informing people about sickle cell anemia, or tuberculosis. Some of our alumni have engaged in environmental cleanup programs, cultural preservation. That's one of the larger things that we do actually. A very well-known program called the Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation provides at times large sums of money to organizations that come up with interesting, viable programs to promote or preserve the culture in their respective countries. Every year we support the African Film Festival here in Lagos. Last year we did a documentary film festival here in Lagos. And some of our IVLPs, International Visitors Leadership Program alumni, have done some very, very valuable work in mentoring students, secondary students here. And we take a lot of pride in that. So those are just some examples of the things that we do. And if you notice, the commonality among these programs is that they support our mission goals here in Nigeria. As I described those goals to you earlier, promoting two-way trade and investment, health assistance, etc. In terms of the programs that we support, they all have to make some connection with those goals. One of the questions that my staff raised with me is they said that people were curious as to what is soft power, and I guess where did that concept come from? But it's actually a very good question. Soft power is a concept that was coined by an American political scientist named Joseph Nye. He coined that phrase back in the 1980s/1990s. He wrote a book on soft power. And his theory is that in this day and age, as compared to previous periods in history, it's important for a country to have effective ability to persuade others to do what it wants, but without force or coercion. Okay? It's very important. Without force or coercion. Some of you who are students of history or students of diplomacy might be quite familiar with the fact that in years past, countries practiced what was called gunboat diplomacy. In other words, threaten countries in order to get them to do what you wanted. We don't do that anymore. And so it is much more important for us to try to convince or persuade countries to do what we believe is important. And in order to do that, these exchange programs or sending students to the United States to study give us the ability to help shape their long-term attitudes and preferences. So therefore, it's not so much important for us to coerce countries. Many of the former students that return to their countries, or maybe officials who have participated in an exchange program, now believe they have a good understanding of the United States. They have a good understanding of what we're trying to achieve in the world, and they're making arguments for those same things in their own countries. That's the way public diplomacy works. And also, public diplomacy is not just a province of governments. In countries around the world, the American private sector, foundations, universities, churches, international civil society organizations, they also play a very, very big role in crafting the image of the United States and advancing American values, American principles. So, in essence, in this day and age, we believe that it's important to win the hearts and minds of citizens around the world, rather than focusing purely on our military strength or threatening war and winning wars. Now, how do we communicate what we're trying to do here? Well, this is probably an easy question for you to answer. So, we operate through traditional media. I talked about some of the interviews that the ambassador is doing this week. We have a website, our embassy website, that you can go to and get very, very good information about what we are doing. Social media, such as today. So we have a Facebook site, we have Twitter page, we utilize Instagram, we use YouTube. We sort of run the gamut in terms of how we engage on social media. Again, because we know that's very important in today's world. It's especially important if we're going to engage in successful outreach to youth. Okay? American Spaces. I described them earlier. We have them throughout the entire country. And some of the best spokespeople or advocates for what we are trying to do are our exchange alumni. They have been to the United States. They have encountered Americans. They understand us far better than those who have not had that experience. And therefore, they are some of the best spokespeople for what we are trying to do. I mentioned that our job as diplomats is to promote, communicate, advance American policy, U.S. foreign policy. But for you, if you're a student or you're just a person who wants to have a better understanding of what the United States is trying to do around the world, well, I don't encourage you to rely upon what people are saying purely on social media or WhatsApp or YouTube. I encourage you to go to official sources, whether that is hearing from the embassy or consulate directly, but also you can see that our White House, the State Department of Washington, the Pentagon, our other agencies and departments that are involved with international affairs are issuing statements, issuing press releases, doing briefings, etc. And so that represents U.S. foreign policy. That represents what we want you to know about what we're doing. Now, the United States is a free country, right? We have freedom of the press, we have freedom of speech. And so lots of different people can offer their opinions about what we do, about what we say. But don't assume that that is U.S. foreign policy. What a private citizen says, whether he be an academic, a clergy member, whether he be a business person, that's their opinion. And again, they are entitled to that opinion, but that is all that is. It's their opinion. So when you read stories that say US-based so-and-so said this, US-based whomever did this, well, they're citizens. They can say what they want. If it's not illegal, they can do what they want. But when we speak about what is U.S. policy, that comes from the government. You can find, again, what the government is saying and doing on state.gov in terms of our mission here in Nigeria, ngusembassy.gov, whitehouse.gov, Department of Defense, defense.gov, and in a place like Nigeria, we have a very robust development agenda, and so USAID.gov is a good source for information about what they are doing. So, one of our former secretaries of state summed up very, very well why it is so important for us to communicate with foreign audiences and help them understand what we're doing and hopefully attract their support for what we are doing. He said, no foreign policy, no matter how ingenious, has any chance of success if it is born in the minds of a few and carried in the hearts of none. Okay? Very well said. When we speak about traditional diplomacy, Traditional diplomacy was basically one government interacting or engaging with another. And that was done by the officials of those two governments. And frankly speaking, the public was not important, okay? It was purely a government to government affair. That is not the way foreign policy is conducted today. Yes, we have ambassadors, we have secretaries of state who engage in the government to government communication and interaction. And obviously a lot of that still takes place behind closed doors. But we recognize that cannot be the extent of our interaction with foreign governments, foreign publics, because the public, regular people, have a great deal of influence over what is going to happen in their countries today. Whether we are talking about people deciding that it was time for the Berlin Wall to come down, and you saw people literally taking their hammers and chisels and taking down that wall. Whether we're talking about the population in Tunisia, which kicked off the Arab Spring, deciding that it was time for a change in their country. Okay? It is not enough to purely interact with foreign governments. We also have to understand and appreciate what is in the minds of the people in these countries. We have to engage with the people in those countries, hopefully influence, persuade, and if we understand them properly, hopefully we can persuade them, influence them to also share our values, our beliefs, and collaborate together to create a better world. That is the purpose of public diplomacy. That is how foreign policy is conducted in today's day and age. And now I'm going to take some of your questions. It looks like I've already received a question, and it is from Chris, who asks, or says, the United States of America is well known for its war against terrorism. Based on your mission statement, why have we not seen any significant U.S. presence in Nigeria's war against Boko Haram? Okay, not a bad question, but it's a question that displays a certain amount of misunderstanding about the U.S. role here. And that's fine, because that's my job to explain what we do and what we don't do. I think what Chris is indicating is he believes because we don't have American troops here in Nigeria fighting against Boko Haram, we're not involved in the fight against terrorism here. And that would be a mistake. In most countries of the world that the United States has a defense relationship or a security relationship with, we don't have American troops there. We don't have American bases in every country of the world. But for those countries that seek out American assistance, we do provide that. And usually that's in the form of advice, okay? And that may be in the form of maybe selling defense equipment. It may be in the form of training, okay? That's how it is in a lot of places, okay? Not every place has American troops. And to be honest, the American public does not want the United States to be fighting everywhere. So Chris, if you're asking, is the United States providing training to the Nigerian armed forces, the answer is yes. If you're asking whether the United States has sold equipment and weapon systems to the Nigerian armed forces, the answer is yes. If you're asking whether the United States provides advice and intelligence support to the Nigerian armed forces, the answer is yes. So that's why I'm saying, Chris, your question shows a little bit of a misunderstanding about what we do around the world. But good question. I see another question from Ola Mead, who asks, in respect to the protection of rights, what is the U.S. mission in Nigeria currently doing towards the violation of human rights during the current pandemic? Okay, another good question. So, and that's related to a question that I saw that somebody, I think, sent to my staff earlier in the week. Now, that question was, why does the United States interfere in so many countries? This question is asking, why aren't we doing something about the violation of human rights? And I guess the previous question would say, hey, you're asking them to interfere. Now, this difference of perspectives is not surprising. We run into this all the time. For some people, the United States doesn't do enough in their countries, doesn't interfere enough. For other people, you interfere too much. You have too much to say. Why don't you mind your own business? Why don't you respect national sovereignty? Okay, so that's a situation where you can't win, right? And that's okay. That is the nature of being a superpower. Okay, what I would say, we do respect national sovereignty, and therefore you are not going to have the United States continually tell Nigerians or the Nigerian government what to do and how it should be doing. That's just not our role. Okay? We assist the Nigerian government where we can, but we respect the fact that the Nigerian government has a responsibility for the welfare of the Nigerian people. When the Nigerian people are dissatisfied with how the government is conducting their business, the Nigerian people are certainly capable of expressing that. And by the nature of the fact that it is a democracy, every 4 years, the Nigerian people can weigh in on how well the government has done. That's the way things work. It is not for the United States to continually try to exert pressure on the Nigerian government or any government in the world to make it do what the United States would prefer it to do. Do we communicate? Oftentimes behind closed doors, our positions, but it's certainly the right of that government to do as it chooses to do in terms of how it deals with its people. Now, I will bring up another concept. We talked about soft power, another concept in international affairs, which may relate to this question. The concept is the responsibility to protect. Okay, so I said traditionally countries very, very are very respectful of national sovereignty. National sovereignty implies that a country should have the absolute right to manage its internal affairs. Key there, internal affairs. No country has the right to interfere in how it handles those internal affairs. But we have seen instances where countries, frankly speaking, have abused that right. Whether we're talking about the situation in Rwanda back in the 1990s, where we saw genocide taking place in the former Yugoslavia, where we saw ethnic cleansing. Some people would say the situation in Myanmar also represented ethnic cleansing. Okay? Well, due to those transgressions, some would say, a concept was advanced through the late 90s, early 2000s called the responsibility to protect, and the United States, the United Nations adopted this concept. Responsibility to protect means that the international community has a responsibility to weigh in when there are proven cases of genocide, ethnic cleansing, or some other type of egregious conduct on the part of a government, even when it is taking place within its own borders. Some people agree with that concept, and others, frankly speaking, take issue with that. You notice that oftentimes the Chinese or maybe the Russians will say, frankly speaking, that the UN does not have the right, does not have the responsibility to interfere, if you want to use that word, in a country's domestic affairs. So, as you can tell, it's a very controversial concept. Countries tend to prefer to have the right to do as they please within their own borders. And even though at times populations certainly feel that other countries should get involved and maybe weigh in and take issue with them, that is quite controversial. And since it is controversial, it is not surprising that oftentimes countries are reluctant to do that. Okay, but good question. Let me look at some of the other ones that were sent to me earlier. This one asks, the U.S. has provided assistance to Nigeria to fight COVID-19. And actually, I think the amount is now up to $32 million. So this question is, why should the U.S. government give Nigeria so much money when it is also grappling with COVID-19 or the pandemic in its own country? And that's a very interesting question. Now, I could answer it by just saying, well, the United States is such a generous country. But I'll go beyond that. What this pandemic, which has spanned the entire world, proves is that no country is an island, if I can use that sort of literary phrase. Pandemics don't respect borders, okay? There are a variety of issues around the world, whether we are talking about pandemics, or maybe we're talking about human trafficking, or we're talking about international terrorism, or illicit financial flows, that no country can curb, curtail, fight by itself, that we have to collaborate and work together if we're going to make progress on these issues. And international health is one of those. The United States also sent people and utilized its funds to help curb the Ebola situation not that many years ago. One of the programs in which we are rightfully proud of because of what it has accomplished is the PEPFAR program, which has spent billions of dollars to make such incredible progress against AIDS and HIV. We shortly may see the elimination of AIDS throughout most of the world. That's an incredible accomplishment if you consider where we were back at the height of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. We believe that international health is something that we must help countries around the world. We must play our part to ensure that not only that we fight these diseases, these pandemics, these problems around the world, if we are to protect ourselves as well. Okay. Next question. From Adesina. People will continue to be in the move in search of greener pastures, whether regularly or irregularly. I think she means, okay, all right, regularly or irregularly. We'll go with that. What are the current efforts of the U.S. government combating irregular immigration and human trafficking? Okay. We take that irregular movement very, very seriously. We know that irregular immigration can cause problems, not just that it represents a danger to those who are attempting to move around the world through these irregular patterns, people who become involved with human traffickers, and they oftentimes put themselves in great danger in dealing with these traffickers. We also recognize that when you come into a country illegally, that also upsets the balances within those countries. There's competition for jobs, as an example, and those who are currently in the country at times take great issue with those who come into the country illegally and then are competing with them for jobs or utilizing government services. Therefore, we certainly believe that the best way for people to immigrate, if they choose to do that, is through the legal processes. Okay? But we also believe that people would not uh, leave their countries irregularly, illegally, um, if there were more opportunity for them in their own countries. If there were more economic progress, maybe greater educational opportunities, etc. And so when we invest in a country like Nigeria, where we try to encourage more foreign investment, where we try to encourage entrepreneurs, that is to create more and better opportunities within that country. Okay? If there are better educational opportunities within Nigeria, people will not feel the need to leave the country. If people feel that they have better health services within Nigeria, people will not feel the need to necessarily leave the country. So when you see that USAID is investing in health and education, if you see that we have a program such as Power Africa to try to help Nigeria with its power problems, if you see that we send people on our exchange programs and then of course they come back to contribute to their own societies, that's creating the conditions whereby people will not feel the need to depart and head for greener pastures. I can't quite read this name, but I'll read the question. Concerning the evacuation flights, some of your citizens have indicated interest since April through filling the questionnaire forms but are yet to be contacted. Now, so you're asking me a consular question. All right, and I'm not a consular officer. You do know that I'm a public affairs officer, and my specialty is public diplomacy. So if you're asking me why someone has not been called to for one of the repatriation flights, I cannot answer that. I'm not going to try to answer that. One thing that a public diplomacy officer learns very, very early on is if you do not know the answer, say that. Okay. So what I can say is that you should go to the STEP program and indicate your interest in these repatriation flights. And I'm sure our consular colleagues will do the best they can to accommodate those that they can. But I'm certainly not going to attempt to explain why some people are called and why others are not. That is totally outside my domain. Okay, next from, I think it's Ahuna. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. He or she says it seems all what the U.S. mission in Nigeria is doing looks good, but its understanding and positive effects are not getting to the grassroots. And the U.S. has been around forever. How can that be tackled? We're not getting to the grassroots. All right. Well, we are continually engaged in attempts to get to the grassroots. That's why you have the American spaces that I talked about around the country. Will we reach everyone? The answer is obviously we cannot. We will try, but we certainly cannot. But if you think about the presence of the American spaces, if you think about the fact that we send so many exchange participants every year, if you think about the fact that Nigeria leads the continent and the students that go to the United States to study every year, if you think about the fact that we are engaged in traditional media engagement, if you think about the fact that we're engaged in social media engagement, I think we're doing a pretty good job. Can we reach everyone? No, we cannot. But I think we are engaged in very, very vigorous efforts to get our message out to everyone, including the grassroots. Oh, Heseye, how do the interests of the host nation come into play with respect to U.S. foreign policy in that nation? Great question. Every country has to look after its own interests, its priorities. As I described, what we attempt to do in public diplomacy is convey that your interests, the interests of a given country, is probably in our interest as well. We share mutual interests. I described the fact that we all have to work together to battle this pandemic. I described the fact that we all have an interest in curbing international terrorism. I can convey that trade works to the benefit of both countries or a variety of countries. International education can be of mutual benefit to both countries. So what we are trying to convey is the United States is not trying to do something in Nigeria that is purely for its interests. Oftentimes, what we are trying to advance is certainly in the interest of Nigerians as well. We want to communicate that, and we want to implement policies that represent those mutual interests. From Gabby, how is the U.S. helping Nigeria in the area of food security? Actually, we're doing a great deal. What the USAID does is promote food security and also help Nigerian agricultural producers find better methods for production, helping them find ways to preserve their products and ship them more efficiently. That will reduce post-harvest loss, it's called, or basically spoilage. We have trade centers that are trying to open up help them take advantage of markets, including in the United States, for their products. If they can sell those products into those markets, and that provides them with a reason to produce more. If you can produce more and more efficiently, that will reduce the cost here in Nigeria for the cost of food. We certainly believe that when we talk about the need for Nigeria to diversify its economy, one of the principal ways in which that can be done to its benefit is to increase and make its agricultural production more efficient, more bountiful. Okay? So we have certainly made that case to the Nigerian government. We're making that case to the Nigerian private sector. We have people here at the consulate representing the United States Department of Agriculture. And so we are certainly trying to do all that we can to help Nigeria in that area. Okay, let's say Chibuka, who says, you said your job is to make foreign countries do what you want. I think that's maybe persuade foreign countries to do what we want. I asked that, is it right to use restrictions on ordinary citizens to make the government comply? An example is banning immigrants to USA because you want Nigerian government to comply. Okay. Let me see if I can answer this. Okay. So we're banning immigrants because we want the United States government to comply. Well, remember, immigration, whether we're talking about non-immigrants, those who go to the United States for purposes of tourism or business or education, or if we talk about immigrants, those who want to go to the United States to live. Okay? In both cases, we're not talking about a right, okay, for them to do that. We're talking about the United States government giving them the opportunity to do that within uh, the constraints of U.S. law, okay, within U.S. law. For non-immigrants, those who want to go and visit the United States, the requirement is we are going to do that if we believe that the person is going to go and follow through on what they have indicated is the purpose of their visit. Okay? Again, they don't have the right to go to the United States, but if we believe that they are going to the United States for a legitimate purpose and they're going to follow through on that purpose and return to their home country, the United States will give them that opportunity as long as it, again, they follow the requirements of U.S. law. For immigrants, again, the U.S. Congress, the United States government establishes policy for how a person can legally immigrate. And also, the United States government must be certain that the government from which those people are departing is also following the requirements of our relationship. Okay? When the United States government has the belief that these individuals or that government is not complying with requirements, then unfortunately, yes, the United States government has the right to restrict immigrants, be they non-immigrant or those immigrants who want to move to live in the United States. The United States government has the right to restrict that opportunity. Okay. How can the U.S. government help Nigeria or Africa in the area of invention, not the usual conventional educational support? How can the U.S. government help Nigeria and Africa in the area of invention? Okay. I would say this question maybe betrays, again, maybe a misunderstanding about some aspects of American culture. Okay. Now, why do I say that? Because the question sort of asks what the U.S. government can do when in the United States, a lot of our inventions or scientific progress is not necessarily the result of government intervention. Some, yes, the space program and its benefits were certainly the result of a huge government program. But oftentimes in our system, invention, innovation is the product of individuals coming up with ideas based on what they believe would be needed or be based on what they believe would be an advancement for the society, a new product or a new service. Companies who come up with ideas, new product, new service. Maybe even in an educational institution, they may, a professor may come up with a brilliant idea. He's a scientist there, he comes up with an idea for a new product or whatever, and it may turn out to have a commercial benefit as well, okay? In other words, a lot of innovation comes from people, organizations outside of the government. We actually believe that the government should not be responsible for everything. Government plays a role, but the private sector plays a huge role as well. okay? Institutions outside of government play a huge role. I think your question suggests that because here you expect so much from the government. I've been here several years now. I can see that very little emphasis is actually placed on the private sector here, okay? Everything that people expect, they expect the government to provide that. And so therefore, when you think about what assistance the United States may offer or provide, you instinctively ask, why can't or why shouldn't the US government do this? When even in our own country, we don't believe that the government should be responsible for everything. What I would ask you is, maybe in Nigeria, in Africa, across the board, it may be better, it may be time to think about how other areas of society can contribute. What can be done, what should be done to enable individuals, institutions, the private sector to promote innovation, to promote inventions that may improve the lives of people in these countries. Do we have another question? And also, how much more time do we have? 20? Okay. All right. For Adoranki, I think I've answered this one already. He says the U.S. is the U.S. helping Nigeria with the power sector, and how is that working out? Well, the U.S. government is certainly helping Nigeria with the power sector. But by the end of that question, he says, how is that working out? That's really for you to decide, not us. All right. When we assist, that doesn't mean that we accomplish everything for you. And you can't hold us accountable for the fact that everything is not yet done to your liking, okay? Don't try to shift responsibility. On one hand, earlier you're telling me about national sovereignty and why the U.S. should or should not be interfering. But now you're going to ask us, why haven't you fixed the power sector yet? Okay, we're not going to fix your power sector. Okay, I did say your power sector. Okay, can we help you? Yes. Can the United States provide assistance? Absolutely. We have the Power Africa program is providing that assistance, is providing advice, is trying to connect Nigerian actors with actors both in the United States and around the world that can contribute to improving the power sector here. But let's not shift responsibilities here. How is the U.S., this is from Coyote, how is the U.S. holding corrupt Nigerian politicians accountable for official excesses, which is similar to the power question. How is the U.S. holding Nigerian politicians accountable? Okay, again, you're a sovereign nation, okay? You're a sovereign nation. I'm gonna beat that into the ground if necessary, okay? You don't ask the United States what we're doing, okay? You should be asking your politician, you should be asking your judicial system, you should be asking your law enforcement, what are you doing to hold these politicians accountable? If you know or have evidence that people are committing crimes, they're corrupt, etc., first and foremost, you should be asking, what are your institutions doing to hold people accountable? First and foremost, okay? Now, where the United States has gathered evidence that people have committed crimes in the United States, or where we have gathered evidence that people have shifted their ill-gotten gains, their funds into American banks. I think you saw last week that over 300 million was returned to Nigeria, the so-called Abacha loot, and I'm quite certain that investigations are still taking place to uncover similar funds throughout the world, both in the United States and the UK and other places. But again, the responsibility for curbing corruption the responsibility for holding your institutions accountable, the responsibility for ensuring that these institutions are more transparent, lies with Nigeria and the Nigerian people. What is the rationale behind flying U.S. citizens back to America while the number of deaths is higher there than in Nigeria? That's a question that is asked by quite a few people. They really don't understand why United States citizens would want to return to America due to the extent of the pandemic there. Maybe it'll be difficult to understand, but I'll try. People in times of crisis prefer to be with friends and family, especially family. So American citizens that are here in Nigeria choose to return back to their homes. Some may only have intended to visit Nigeria for a relatively short period of time. Maybe it was to visit relatives here, maybe it was they were here for business purposes, etc. Did not intend to stay here for an extended period of time. But then commercial flights were ended. They had no means to return back to what they consider to be their home country, even if they're Nigerian Americans. They live in the United States now. They are considering that to be their home country. Without any ability to leave on a commercial flight, the United States government, as representative of its responsibility to its citizens, chartered flights to return its citizens back to their homeland, back to the United States, and force them to go. Okay, this is their choice. They have signed up because they want to return home. Maybe they didn't have the ability to stay here longer than they anticipated, and they want to return back to where their friends and their family are. And the foremost responsibility of any government, besides looking after the welfare of its citizens in their country, is to look after the welfare of its citizens as they travel around the world. That's why we have consular operations. I know some people believe, oh, it's because we do visas. Actually, the foremost responsibility of consular sections, whether it be here in Lagos, in Abuja, Johannesburg, Nairobi, Paris, Rome, London, to look after the interests of American citizens that are visiting those countries. Foremost responsibility. Foremost responsibility. The welfare of American citizens abroad. And so, the US government recognized that with the cancellation of commercial flights throughout the entire world, one of our responsibilities was to enable its citizens to return to their home country. The State Department engaged in a massive effort to enable those citizens to return. I think it's now roughly 50, 60,000 US citizens around the world have returned to their home country. I mean, maybe more than that at this point, but that was a figure I saw not too long ago. And over, I think it's maybe 1,600 American citizens here in Nigeria also have returned to the United States. That's our job. That's what we do. Fayasayo, okay, he's complimentary. He says, thank you for the good job you're doing. I would like to ask if there are specific semi-formal networking sessions that bring Nigerians and Americans to interact and share innovative ideas that would improve the diplomatic ties. Actually, the answer is yes. When I spoke about those American spaces, yes, they do a fantastic job in providing informal opportunities for Nigerian and Americans to interact. Sam Ayatayo, who's the director of the American Center here at the consulate, does a variety of programming, providing people with digital skills, trying to help the unemployed become employable. He has done a fantastic film series of exposing American values and history to Nigerians via film. With all these programs, there's opportunity for conversation and discussion. Sometimes they feature American officers, but not all of the time. But the bottom line is these are great opportunities for that sort of informal interaction that you're talking about. And I'm going to be complimentary to him. He's keeping that going on even during this pandemic, in which we're not having the same face-to-face interaction that we might have during better times, but we're still engaging with the Nigerian people, with the Nigerian public virtually, whether it be a program such as today or other programs that he's doing. He has done a program in which individuals are reading traditional children's stories to kids who are out of school, who are forced to remain at home right now. I think these are great examples of, again, the desire by both Americans and Nigerians to share our mutual interests, how we can help each other out during these trying times. Okay, when is the seminar on investing with the U.S. company in Nigeria going to come up? All right, let me try to understand this question. All right. If you're describing whether there are seminars or programs that explain to U.S. companies about opportunities to invest in Nigeria, we have ongoing programs to do that, to provide information to U.S. companies that are interested in investing or doing business in Nigeria. We have a foreign commercial service that is based here, and that is their expertise. So we do that all the time. We are also offering information to Nigerians who are interested in investing in the United States. So we do that, and we do that all the time. Again, that is not my particular area of expertise, but I am quite familiar that we do that. Okay. Try to avoid repeating the same questions. Five minutes? Okay. Let's see what else I can ask. Oh, okay, this is probably a good one. I have a question concerning your exchange programs. How can some of us who do not know anybody at the U.S. mission benefit from them? Okay, great question. And I think that stems from the fact that people believe that you have to know somebody in order to participate in these programs. Well, I would say it certainly helps if we are familiar with you to participate in these programs, but we don't have to. All right, so what I would recommend that you do, go on the embassy website, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. When we are recruiting for our exchange programs, such as the Fulbright program, Mandela Washington Fellow program, we are advertising. It's not a secret, okay? We are informing people that this opportunity exists, and we are informing you what the deadlines are, and we are informing you as to how to apply. Then the burden falls on you, okay? But I'm recommending, I am urging you to follow us on social media, to know where you can find our embassy website and go to that site on a regular basis and get the information, okay? I'm urging you to make the effort to get the information. And if you do so, then you apply. And I then wish you the best of luck because I know nothing about your qualifications, but if you are qualified, if you can present a good case for why you are the best person to participate in these opportunities, and these opportunities are there for you to take advantage of. Okay. Can you explain what you do with regard to cultural programs and how can a typical Nigerian benefit from them? And I'm going to guess that may be the last question that I get to answer. That is correct. I'm being told I have to get off soon. So, cultural programs. We do quite a few. I mentioned the fact that we support film festivals here. We invite American artists to come here, musical artists to come and play in Nigeria. We've had a sports diplomacy program where we have supported American baseball and softball here in Nigeria. We brought two female American football or soccer players, depending on what word you use, to come here and do clinics for Nigerian girls. All of those programs engage regular, ordinary Nigerians. Okay? The football or soccer program took place in Edo State that involved over 100 young girls there. The baseball and softball program took place in Ibadan. Involved 100 or so young Nigerian baseball players, involved female softball players. These are not programs geared for the elite, okay? The Hunter Tones, an American musical group, came here and played at Freedom Park in Lagos, Freedom Park in Lagos, and also did a program down in Edo State. All these programs were open to regular, everyday Nigerians. We had a Navy band that came here and played in Freedom Park, played at University of Lagos. Again, we're talking about programs that are open and available to average Nigerians. Most, I would say the overwhelming majority of cultural programs that we do are available to the typical Nigerian. So I hope that answers your question. Our American Spaces are doing a fantastic job. This Conversation Café is a program that is sponsored, organized, managed by the American Space here in Lagos, but they're doing fantastic work throughout the country. I sincerely encourage you to go to these spaces. Remember that in the southern part of the country, we have 3 here in Lagos. We have 1 in Port Harcourt. We have 1 in Ibadan. We have 1 in Calabar. Okay? They are open to the general public. They do a variety of very, very interesting educational, cultural programs. For those of you who are interested in what we do for the typical Nigerian, go there, find out, take advantage of the programs. It has been my pleasure to speak to all of you. I hope you have learned a few things. I totally recognize that you won't agree with me on everything, and that's totally fine. That's to be expected. But I think you have a better idea of the American perspective. You have a better idea of what we are doing here in Nigeria. You have a better idea of what we are trying to accomplish. And if anytime we have this exchange of ideas, this communication taking place, then we all benefit. Agreement is not necessary, but we all benefit. So thank you very, very, very much for your time today. I apologize for our technical problems. Hopefully we'll get those ironed out in the future, but I really enjoyed this opportunity to interact with you. Thank you very, very much. Have a great day.